It's another beautiful day here in Lake Tahoe on July 2nd, 2024. Today's guest is Kevin Marshall, the co-founder and former president of Clear Capital, one of the nation's leading real estate valuation, technology, and analytics firms. Kevin co-founded Clear Capital back in 2001, headquartered in Truckee, California. Before he retired, Kevin helped grow Clear Capital into a behemoth, being used by over 20,000 independent contractors nationwide, facilitating over 6 million valuation transactions per week, and pulling together over 2 petabytes of valuation data over their lifespan. Kevin and I also share a deep passion for cars, yet another thing that I'm very excited to discuss with him. Kevin, welcome to Tahoe Minds.
Thanks for having me.
So I'd love to start first by talking about your career before Clear Capital.
Yep.
Were you still doing tech stuff? Was that a new thing?
No, I had a very meandering path, which is very, very fortunate how my path worked out. My wife and I are both from Auburn, California. We got married mid-90s and actually had a degree in theology, and which is really interesting. It's not a lot of jobs, but it was a really interesting adventure because it really helped me dig in to understand how people work and think. But I really, after about a year of marriage, I realized that, shoot, I need to make a living as well if I'm going to have a family. And so I actually went back to school. My wife and I moved down to San Luis Obispo, went back to school, and we were, it was the top ramen days, and so we were. I called a buddy of mine, and so this is 96, 97, during that first .com boom, when the web was really, people were figuring out really how to use the web. A buddy of mine had a consulting company in Pleasanton, and I called him and I said, "Hey, I need a job at night to help, put myself through college, and I said, hey, can I program for you?" And he says, "Oh, I didn't know you knew how to program." And I said, "Yeah, figure it out." We don't really have YouTube back then, so you're going to Barnes and Noble and looking for relevant books. But what I ended up doing is join the firm, and they were doing a lot of government municipality contracting for the state of California and cities and counties. And they were building Visual Basic apps, so old school client server applications, install the disk, and have your software, and then contact a database somewhere else. And my boss said, "Hey, figure out how to put software in a browser." And because back then, the web very, very young, and it was used for just very static uses, pulling up information that someone would type in there. And so I just had a ton of fun figuring that out, started taking computer science classes. My professors had no clue at the time how to put software in a browser. And so we had a lot of fun kind of iterating, just talking long hours in the night. Well, within like 6 months of doing that, I realized, one, I had a knack for it. 2, I was probably making more money than I would ever be teaching English. And 3, I was just having a ton of fun. And so I pivoted and went into business consulting, tech consulting. And from there, I joined the firm, started a web services division, and basically took all the software that we were building for these municipalities in the state of California and started putting it in a browser. And then training up these programmers on stuff that I had just learned like months prior on how the browser could be the interface for distributing software. And so from there, just started doing business consulting and just taking a lot of different businesses and understanding how they worked, what their technical and operational problems were, and figuring out how to put widely distributed software into a browser, which bled really nicely into e-commerce, e-government, and the way we know the web today, which is a more interactive. You're interacting with data from the browser. So that was like the first foray into tech, from theology to teaching English to the tech world, which I enjoyed today.
So was it mostly governments that you were doing this work for, the consulting and stuff, or were there other companies that also, benefited from this web-based software?
Yeah, a lot of California counties were very progressive in the late 90s. They saw, like the pets.com and the web van, a lot of the big famous crashes of people using the early internet for commerce reasons, and those companies just didn't work out. They didn't survive the crash of 2000, 2001. But a lot of these progressive counties were recognizing that things like permitting water quality testing, permitting milk, underground storage tanks, things where they had a lot of constituents, that are widely distributed, that could fill out and get approval for these permits and these testing results online. It was a lot more inefficient. It was a lot more efficient than fax machines, and they're able to start keeping the data. So it was actually, it was really interesting that the government was actually a really, really progressive use of software in a browser.
Yeah, wow, that is. So, did doing work for these, government entities allow you to weather the storm better than other companies, because they weren't, these were necessary websites. They weren't really part of that bubble.
Yeah, they the crash in 2000, 2001. Then we had that little Y2K thing, which upended a lot of tech firms as they're just scrambling to fix glitches, whether they're perceived or real. A lot of people thought, shoot, if I have a 4-digit date, nuclear missiles are going to shoot out of my my grocery delivery company. So that and the recession that happened around that time, really put a damper on a lot of innovation. And one of my clients was my business partner, and he had just had us do some very light tools to advertise his real estate business. But we got along really well. The more I got to know him, I realized that there was this whole industry I had never been aware of, this back-end mortgage valuation analytics space that had really been untouched by technology through that massive web boom. And so one morning, I was working for another startup. We had an office over on Donner Lake, and it was July 2000, 2001, I guess. And that company, great company, but the recession hit them hard. We were automating business leases and great tech stack, but customers just kind of went away. And so we ran out of money. And I was like the first employee in, so I was like first in, so I was like all optioned up. And I kind of rolled my chair to the back of the door, and I called my business partner who was down in the Bay Area. I said, hey, why don't you come on up to my home in Truckee and let's figure out a business plan. I had some ideas to put a profit model around it, and within a month, we were turning revenue. Wow. And so, because that sector of the industry that I got introduced to, I realized that, they needed technology deeply. Heavy data business, no data management skills whatsoever.
So, as pretty much everybody in business knows, real estate is one of, if not the most saturated markets. So, what really allowed you guys to succeed? Was it just that technology and innovation? How did you guys come out on top in such a densely saturated market?
Yeah, it's really two parts to our secret recipe. One was technology. I looked at the biggest competitors in the field that we'd be going up against, and they were scaling by adding more fax machines. And so, those 20,000 contractors that you mentioned that we were using to source a lot of data, the industry is just using fax machines to get those in there. One, highly inefficient, no way to quality control the data other than a manual process, and they weren't making any derivative uses of the data to create more analytics to help people understand not what's happening on just one property, but what's happening in a city, a county, a state, or the nation. So the technology and having a respect for the data, fighting against the fax machines was one thing. The other end of it is that there's just a lot of people that just really weren't going above and beyond to take care of their clients. And so they might be ordering, $100, a couple $100, our clients, the banks, might be ordering a couple $100 report on an opinion of value. And our competitors just weren't treating that as though they had to make a decision on a $400,000 real estate property that they were holding, or maybe it was in default, or they were buying to sell it in some mortgage-backed security package. And so we really approached the business with, every deal, we're gonna respect that someone at our clients is putting their career on the line by trusting us to give them the analytics to understand how to purchase, dispose of, or trade that property. And so the service model became just as important as the tech model.
I see. So I want to go back and talk a little bit about how tough it was initially, because you can care about your customers way better than your competitors, but if you don't get, if your competitors aren't aware of your company or product, it'll be pretty tough to gain market share. So how difficult was it to get those first few customers? Was there any onboarding? Did people even know how this technology worked?
Not at all. Yeah, and banking's come a long way in the last 20 years. Man, 20 years ago, technology was very foreign. It was very suspect. There's a million ways a mortgage lender, a mortgage servicer, or a GSE, government-sponsored entity, can get in trouble. And so and there's massive inefficiencies, very fragmented industry on the back end, a lot of manual process, which makes it very slow, expensive, and error prone. And we were there to solve all those problems. So we actually didn't start as a data and valuation company. We built up a SaaS platform. Before it was called SaaS. Back then it was called a application service provider, an ASP. And so we basically built a web-based software that would tie loan servicers together with their own supply chain and help them get in valuations, manage the procurement of those, the quality control, and the payment to the supply chain. Because that was where we saw the biggest amount of inefficiency. But getting our clients back then to really understand how software could exist in a browser, they said, how many servers do I need? You don't need any. We got the servers. Can you come to Dallas and install your software? Like, no, just pull up a browser and log in. You're already, I've already turned you on, you can go. And it was just an unsophisticated industry back then. And so we eventually realized that we weren't going to talk the whole industry into moving away from fax machines to this web-based software. And so we then pivoted to become a software company and a tech-enabled services company where we were providing the full outsourced services to procure all that data, manage the supply chain, and just get them clean data that was actionable for their business decision. So it was a really hard sell, but once we pivoted, it just took off.
Yeah. So did your customer change at all? Did your target customer change before the pivot and after the pivot, or pretty much targeting the same types of customers?
Yeah, so in those early days, this is the pre-2007, 2008 crash, so in between crashes, which is crashes are where opportunity lie. They can be very, there's always winners and losers in a crash, but when the market switches, that's a lot of opportunity. In that run up from 2001 to 2007, 2008, we had two primary categories of clients. One were loan servicers, people that were managing the defaults on homes. And the other were the mortgage-backed security folks that became very famous, who were buying large amounts of loans and assembling those into securitization packages. But the way we served those guys, the Wall Street guys, was really, there was a lot of natural disasters in the South and Southeast, mainly hurricanes leading up to Katrina. Katrina was one of many hurricanes. And what we saw when there was a large amount of purchasing activity for the mortgage-backed securities, they would have billions of dollars on the line that these trades need to close. And all of a sudden a hurricane would come through and they didn't know which homes they were buying still existed, still had a foot of water in them, or were literally just swiped off the foundation. So we, again, pivoted very quickly and started creating literally products overnight. We call them post-disaster inspections, pulling in data from FEMA aerial imagery that NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, was posting online. Found these weird repositories of 2-day-old low-level imagery taken of Katrina. Helicopters are still hovering over homes, pulling people out. We got all that data, the FEMA data. We built up a huge amount of powerful computers and Google Earth licenses, because that was still downloaded software. And we started creating these analyses for Wall Street to say, hey, we know you have like a multi-billion-dollar package closing in a couple days. Here's actually a picture of your home before and after the flood that happened 4 days ago. And when Wall Street saw us doing stuff like that, they're like, oh, these guys are different. They're not just running fax machines. They're innovative, they're creative, but really we cared to stay up all night to take care of of our clients. And that was really that service difference that really endeared us to Wall Street, that still helps us today.
Gosh, so all this data that you guys collect and use, all the pictures and stuff, what else? How do you organize the data, and what else are you guys able to use it for?
Yeah, so every time we run one data report, whether it's a post-disaster inspection or a broker price opinion or an appraisal review, an appraisal, whatever it was, we reposed all of that data and we tagged which data had different rights on it, so we knew how we could use it in derivative products. So, really understanding the value of one property is important, but understanding the value and the changes in value of one property compared to its peers, its comparable properties in the neighborhood, in the county, is really a very important metric that these large banks, whether they're on the servicing default side or the loan origination side, refi, or Freddie and Fannie buying loans in the secondary market or selling loans, all these guys need to understand the relationship between one property to its peers. And that's the very core of real estate valuation. And so you can do that with a broker price opinion, an appraisal, a desktop appraisal, an automated valuation model, or any host of other automated analytic products. So yeah, you can get as creative as you want. You build giant models with your ML and your AI teams, test them out, see if the banks like them, if they pass their model validation test. And so that's a lot of fun innovating with data. But reposing the data and managing the data well from day one is key to doing that. And that was something that we were literally on day one. We had a respect for data when our peers in the industry did not.
So you guys so it sounds like you didn't do much marketing or sales. It was kind of, you guys were just able to make such a great product. It kind of sold itself.
Yeah. Up until that 2008 crash, it was word of mouth. It's a very small industry on Wall Street. It's the loan servicing world. People move between shops very quickly, and so the word got around pretty quickly that these guys are doing something different.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about differentiating yourself and innovation. What other aspects of corporate culture did you guys foster to be able to succeed for such a long period of time?
Yeah, so many businesses, when they get started, they have advisors and investors. They say, here's how you build a sales team. Here's how you build an HR team. Here's how you build product. Here's your capital management plan. They look at these very tactical things of how to build a company. What a lot of them really miss is that when you build a team and they go to work 8 o'clock every morning, Monday through Friday, leave at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, those people are spending more time together during their work week than they are with their families. And most of us, we need to work. We need to eat. We need to put gas in the gas tank. But there's not a lot of attention paid to what are the dynamics between that community of people that are thrown together for basically, financial capitalist purposes. How do they get along? And in the time, I don't know if you ever seen it, back in 1997, I think it was 97 or 99, a movie came out called Office Space with Jennifer Aniston. It was Mike Judge, the guy who did Beavis and Butthead, which became popular again thanks to SNL. He wrote a satire on corporate American work culture. And it was just eviscerating corporate American work culture because the subtitle, the tagline of the movie was "Work Sucks." And so we really looked at that there was a disillusionment of the gray cubicle farm. Everybody's wearing the same clothes. They check in, they check out. They don't really enjoy what they're doing. They're lifeless, And we looked at the satire of that, and I said, there's got to be a better way to spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week with these people and do something good together for the industry. So we focused a lot on building a culture of people who had some mission, some purpose to what they're doing. It's easy to say, I'm sitting in front of a computer processing valuations, but you're also talking to some guy in in the northern tip of Maine, a real estate agent who you're giving him work to do. He is putting food on his table because the work you do in Truckee, California, hopping on the phone to this guy. He is enabling a real estate transaction. Someone's buying their home. Their kids are excited to move in and hang a picture of a Lamborghini on the wall, as you and I probably did when we were kids. And, it's more than just a data report. There's a lot of people involved in a real estate transaction. This is a big part of their life, both on the buyers, the sellers, the people working at the bank who are just trying to earn a living. And so we gave them something more personal to think about. And then we also said, hey, every time you come to work in the morning, this is when we were in Truckee, like, let's say it dumps 2 feet of snow. People are trying to get to work. Let's say you slip on the snow and your phone gets ejected into a snowbank. You're digging for it. We've all been there living up here. And then you're late to work. You come in, the coffee pot's empty. And we would say, hey, you're going to have those mornings, but the person sitting next to you is going to have those mornings too. Be on the lookout for who's having a rough day and go and be their savior for that day. So looking out for others people's best interest before your own. So that culture was very, very important to what we did.
So how do you go about hiring in this culture? How do you get people excited about this mission? Because it's getting me excited, but I feel like there's a lot of people who just wouldn't be the right fit, or wouldn't be in line with this culture. So how do you hire people that are in line with this culture and wanting to work on the same mission as you guys?
A couple of different things that really helped us out in doing that. One, you had to be purposeful about it. But the first thing we did is that Sheree and I, we moved to Truckee in 98, 99. There's no tech up here. I literally had 4 56K modems all linked to my computer that were multi-linking, just like a couple 100K of internet connectivity. It was awful. But we moved to Truckee, got an office on Donner Lake. We took over the lease from a prior company that I had worked at. But the idea of that office was just to bring people up from the Bay Area that knew how to program, because it was so competitive back in the day, that I figured if I could give them a season pass and an office on Donner Lake, I could attract the cream of the crop. And I could also be very selective on who I hired, rather than competing with the masses in cubicle farms down in the peninsula. So that was part of it. Being in Truckee, we just attracted people that were pretty smart, pretty well educated. I mean, very smart, very well educated, very lifestyle oriented. They were healthy. They weren't going home at night and eating a bunch of Twinkies. They were going, and skinning the Sunrise Bowl in the backside of Tahoe Donner and getting some turns in. So one, our employees were just healthy and smart and motivated, and they wanted to work hard because we all wanted to stay in Truckee. If Clear Capital didn't make it in Truckee, we all knew there was no backup job in town. It's either back to the bridge tender, or moving back down to the Bay. So we were all very motivated to make it work. So that was one. Two, I think for the first 500 employees, I sat down and met in groups of 8 to 10 of them and had a new hire meeting. Learned everybody's name. Got to ask them kind of a few fun questions. Got to know them as individuals, not just employees. And then I gave them the grand social challenge. I said that corporate America is inherently selfish. If you and I are on a team together and our supervisor leaves or gets promoted or fired or whatever, and now all of a sudden you and I are in competition for that job. So no longer are you and I working together as a team. If you do good one morning and I don't, and the bosses see that, I'm like, oh shoot. He's going to get the job, not me. And so it turns corporate America into dog eat dog. And a lot of people like the theory that when your employees are competing with each other, you get the most productivity. I'm like,
Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah, yep. And Jack Welch after him. And yeah, it's like, I don't know, because that's not how a family works. That's not how your friend group works. That's not how a marriage works. So those things, those micro communities that are all very important to our lives, they work because we're actually looking out for each other's best interests. So we would turn it around today. I'm going to promote the person, not who has the best performance, who can push everybody down and look better. I'm going to promote the person who everybody on that team says, I want to work for them because they actually care about me and making my day better, making me more productive, not making me look like a jerk. So little tricks like that, not tricks, but little realities, making corporate America more mimic a community of friends or family and having people support each other. And it was great because when people got promoted, the team was like, yes, I got to work for her. This is great. She's awesome, And so it really, a lot of different things to help build that cohesiveness. Because if you're only in it for the money, every business is going to hit the doldrums or the headwinds, and they're going to go backwards. And if everybody's only in it for the money, they're gone. But if they care about their vendors, they care about their customers, and they love the people that they're working with, and they have a higher sense of mission, then they can bond together and says, we can get through this, we can kick butt, we can grow during these doldrum times in a way that our competitors cannot. So it's really hard to do if you're not thinking about your employees as a community, and because there's power issues at work and you need to navigate those well. There's always going to be power issues at work. But when you have a community of people who understand why those things exist, people at the top that are empathetic, people are in the middle and new to the company that are actually believing in something more than just a paycheck and stamping in and out, you can do really neat things to pivot and weather bad times.
So how did you pivot in 2008 using this culture that you guys had built?
Yeah, so we were in a really interesting position because we had data on so many of the loans that were in these toxic mortgage-backed securities. We weren't putting the securities or the CDOs together, but we were the data provider behind a lot of those loans. And so we ended up having all of this data. And so when they have these large mortgage securities, they need to figure out which loan was which, what's the value of the loan. If it's in default, there's usually a correlation, missed payments, 30, 60, 90, 120 days to the condition of the home. And looking back in 2007, 2008, 2009, a lot of times people would stop making payments on their home. They knew they were going to lose the home, so they'd sell the copper, the microwave, the fixtures, which for the bank who owns the note on that home, the value is getting, not only are they not getting their mortgage payment, the value is going down due to deferred maintenance or purposeful fraud. So we took that data and then we built up a larger pool of real estate agents to help keep an eye on this, on the property, and keep track of condition and value as it dropped every 30, 60, 90 days. And it did two things. One, it gave the government, Freddie and Fannie, it gave the large mortgage-backed securities and the servicers eyes and ears what's happening on those properties. Because when it goes through the foreclosure process, they go to remarket the property. If the market's dropping like a tank and they price it a little too high, the market's always going to be dropping. They're going to be chasing it down, and then we'd say, okay, well, if you price it down here, you're ahead of the market. Like, no, we can't leave money on the table. Well, by the time you get your sign in the front yard, bam, the market's dropped. So I think we doubled in size in 2008, 2009. It was crazy. Just every building we could get in Truckee, massive square footage, massive hiring spree, but it was counter-cyclical to everybody else getting laid off. And so, we didn't want to be in the position where we were profiting off of others' misfortune, but we were able to grow and profit off helping people unwind, putting people back to work, keeping real estate agents and appraisers working. And so as hard as the time as it was for the country and the industry, we had a lot of pride that we were able to provide so many jobs and clarity through data to our clients.
Wow. So you think this all goes back to that same, corporate culture that you guys had built, really wanting to work for the company, caring a lot about your customers and being willing and able to pivot and innovate?
Yeah, hey, guys, we have the president of this bank calling and just yelling into the phone because they're panicked. Something's going to happen in 2 days. They have no idea what they own, and the regulators are knocking on the door. We didn't have to ask our staff to stay. Be like, we're on this, We'll get paid time and a half, sure. And, we'll really help these guys. And we created a lot of great careers in the industry. Those people that eventually left Clear Capital, they took that ethic to other firms and had a positive impact wherever they went.
So we touched on this briefly earlier. You guys headquartered, when you opened up, when you started, it was headquartered in Truckee, Donner area. I do want to ask what first, brought you up here, and then why did you stay, and what bigger impacts has that had on the business as a whole? Yeah,
so initially when we moved up here, during that first .com boom, I could really work. I was working for the firm in Pleasanton and Walnut Creek, pre-Y2K. My wife and I, we love San Luis Obispo, but we wanted to get back to the mountains, and we were climbers, mountain bikers, hikers. We just love being outside, love playing in the lakes. And we wanted more dramatic weather than San Luis Obispo. It's always you lived in carpentry, it's always nice, it goes from like 62 to 72, and if it rains for 2 days, there's a mass depression. But we love the dramatic weather of Truckee. And so we moved up, and then I opened that office in Donner Lake and started, as we talked about earlier, bringing people up working there. And really found we had a very tough lifestyle, resilient, nice group of people to work with. When we started Clear Capital, my business partner was in the Bay. He had 2 young kids and who are now grown. And I got an office above the Blue Coyote in Truckee. And actually before the Blue Coyote was there. And we had it's pretty small, like a 2 bedrooms office. We had 11 people crammed in there. I had a Honda generator underneath my desk when the power went out. In the summertime, it would get super hot. And then Blue Coyote moved in, and their grease fryer right below our only window that opened, So every day we'd smell like hamburgers coming home. Our keyboards were covered with grease. And it was just pure bootstrap fun startup time. But then when Pioneer Commerce Center got built, we moved into like 3,500 square feet over there. Had 30 desks in there, and they were building a bunch of hundreds of thousands of square feet over there. We started hiring operational people, and when our competitors, that were like in Pittsburgh or Dallas or wherever, they were just hiring whoever they could get to fill these entry-level jobs. We were putting jobs out, and I literally put an ad in the Sierra Sun that said, "Wanted nice people." And I think that we put another one that said, "Wanted nice people, no cubicles, no fake plants." Just kind of really building up the Truckee culture. And we would get people applying for entry-level jobs that had like master's degrees. And they were people from Cornell, and they were working at Palisades, the resorts and the bars. And I think their parents loved me more than they did. It's like a real job, you're working with Wall Street in Truckee. But it was such a great group of people, amazing group of people. And they were harder working, resilient. We had people snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, snowmobiling to the office, when they needed to. But it enables us to get, not only do we have the technology, but it enables us to get a huge head start on other competitors who are starting to figure it out, quite simply because we just had tough Truckee people. Yeah. And they were smart and motivated.
And then, so you guys relocated to Reno, which is still in the Tahoe area. Was it for that same reason? You wanted to, maintain the culture, maintain the same types of people that work for you?
Yeah, it was a really hard decision. Governor Sandoval and Mike Kaczmarski at EDON, they called one morning and said, "You guys want to have breakfast? Let's talk. You guys are in Truckee, but you're 30 miles from Reno." And right about the same time as that, a number of our executives could afford to live in Truckee, but a lot of entry-level folks, there was just not a lot of housing. And the other part of it, there wasn't a lot of fallback jobs. If someone came up and moved to Truckee, worked at Clear Capital, and it just wasn't a fit for whatever reason, it's very expensive to move back, so they couldn't just go next door and work at another company. Whereas Reno, right around that time when we moved, it was having a jobs, influx of jobs, tech jobs, manufacturing, the Trick Center out there, the Tesla came in. So in Reno, there became more fallback jobs. UNR basically said, "Hey, we want you here." Governor Sandoval said, "Hey, we want to keep the best and brightest from Reno in Nevada." And so, worked a lot with curriculum development with UNR, had internship programs. They were working on our tech stacks. So like, "Hey, what stats language do you use?" Like, "We use R, the stats language." And they said, "Great, we'll be teaching classes on that." And so, it's not that we had any problem with Truckee, but between, the cost of rents and the square footage, I think we had 350 people in Truckee. It was hard to put them anywhere. A lot of them were already living in Reno and commuting. So eventually we just had to, we moved down there to downtown Reno, overlooking the ballpark, free soccer, baseball, and Nitro Circus shows, and concerts, and great partnerships with Nevada and UNR. And it really allowed us to grow our headcount and our footprint, but still maintain that Truckee tough culture that we had.
For sure. I do want to go back to this data thing because I do think it's such an important part of your business. Broadly speaking, generally speaking, what is the most beneficial way that you guys use and leverage the data for to grow your business, get more customers?
Yeah, the AI boom in the last 18 months has been significant in how people can process data. And this is something we've been doing for 10 years. We just didn't have the nice NVIDIA chips to do it on back in the day, So we were literally building giant racks of servers just to do this stuff. It was pre-Amazon. And the big differentiators are making sure that you have legal access to your data. And so anybody can go out there and scrape a whole bunch of data, but it's illegal data. If you're selling to a large federally regulated institution like a Chase or a Wells Fargo or Freddie or Fannie, if you want to sell analytics to them, they're going to come in and do their due diligence. They do not want to be on the headlines for saying, hey, we steal data from appraisers and realtors and MLS boards, which a lot of people have done and still do. They'll scrape realtor.com or whatever. So we took really good care to make sure we knew the legal rights over the data. We went and partnered with nearly every MLS in the country. And so we worked with them. How do we get access to your data to support your business and create these analytics and create revenue back to you, but also create greater accuracies, for the lenders that realtors need to be able to loan cash to their client.
And really quickly, what is an MLS for those of us who are not acquainted?
Multiple listing service. So that's the shared data cooperatives that each county or city or region has. All the realtors put their listings and sales in there. And that's very valuable data, is that the data that the realtors protect, because that's their lifeblood. They are the ones who are the professionals on what their market is doing. And so they don't want that data to just be given away and sold to someone else. So we needed to find ways to work with the MLS boards and the realtors to have legal access. And once you build, you have these great data taggings of understanding which data you can use. Then you just throw a lot of quants at it, and machine learning guys and AI guys, and hey, what can we do? And when we moved to the cloud, models that used to take us 3 weeks to build these models, guys were running these things at lunchtime. And so a lot of smart people, thanks to being in Reno, we had another offices in Sacramento with a lot of great engineers. And we were coming up with just really unique models that, if you think of it like a Zestimate, nobody trusts a Zestimate, or not, because you don't know which ones are right, which ones are wrong. Everybody loves to find the wrong ones. But a lot of the same models behind a Zestimate on Zillow are very important, because a big bank needs to have a very quick look at what the value of 1 million properties might be doing. But they need to know which ones are good and which ones are bad. So we would put very rigorous standard deviation statistical models saying, hey, in this property right here, this automated valuation model, we have a whole lot of data. So we have great data density. We're very confident in the model. This other one over here, it's like a home on Pinecone Beach, an incline, there's not a lot of comps for it. So it's very thin data. So you have a very low confidence score. And that would allow our clients to use those models we came up with, and their quants could look at it and say, okay, we have confidence in this data, but not confidence in this data, so that they can come up and give their stakeholders accurate information that's statistically valid, that's just not a crapshoot. So similar to his estimate, but one's for consumer research, one's for banks actually making real decisions.
And how is that incorporated into the business model? Was it just part of what you were selling these big banks, or was it just packaged into it, or was it a separate thing?
Yeah, working with big banks, a lot of times you bundle a lot of products. It just depends what they have a lot of regulations on if they're given something, they don't want to look like they're doing anything improprietary. So we sold all those products. And so some years you sell like an API, they'd have a subscription service. Other times they'd buy it by a loan level. But yeah, it was all for profit, and it was very, very valuable to them to have a very quick look at data, or a quick look at neighborhood or national values and their changes.
So living in Tahoe, I do want to get your thoughts or any predictions about the real estate market. It's pretty insane here. After COVID hit, house prices spiked pretty huge. So what are your predictions for the next 5-10 years in terms of housing prices here in Tahoe?
Real estate predictions, real estate's always very cyclical, and it was that way until like 2008, 2009, and a lot of the historical cycles that we all relied upon kind of fell apart just because there was so much financial engineering in the loan process. The ultra low rates. Everybody should own a home. A lot of the political movement in the late '90s, early 2000s. A lot of these things skewed how real estate is owned and is bought and sold. But rolling from a very low interest rate environment into COVID, where obviously there's a lot. You have people moving around a lot. When you have people moving around a lot, you have a lot of volatility. That's why a lot of economists get very scared of climate change, because that's going to cause people to move around a lot, creates volatility. So we will have a lot of volatility in the future. No matter what your view on climate change is, people will be moving. And so that's an aspect of it. Pandemics, people move. Shifts in job market, people will move. So when it creates demand in an area like Truckee and Tahoe, where people want to get up here and work remotely, it is going to skew the natural real estate cycles. And then you have now an environment where very high interest rates, not just in the US, but many countries, high inflation globally, all of these things create a market where people who have cash have the advantage, people who need to borrow don't have the advantage. But really there's millions and millions of people they wish they could level up their home, but they have a 3% loan. Why would you give that up for a 7% loan? And so it really creates it really stratifies the real estate market on these different groups. Who has cash, who's locked in, who's a first-time buyer. I would not even want to venture to what Incline's going to do, because you have the whole country and there's a lot of great neighborhoods that are really easy to value. KB Homes or Pulte Homes, they build 1,000 homes. There's 3 models. Every other home, is the same one. So really easy comparables. But Incline, there is nothing homogenous about Incline. And so this is one of those crazy volatile markets where the real estate is not just driven by demand, but there's other things. A tax law in California will create a boom over here, the way it did in 2012, 2013. So my prediction is that Incline will stay absolutely nutty. There'll be absolute demand. But as everybody knows, the biggest issue around the basin, workforce housing. And in commercial development or residential development, you buy a plot of land, what's the highest and best use economically? How do I get the most money out of this thing? Well, I'll build a $20 million spec home rather than 20 market rate units. Yeah. So we have a real economic versus societal problem that is going to be a really hard one to figure out.
So you stepped down as president of Clear Capital in 2019 for a more minor role as a board member and strategic advisor. So what initially led to that decision, and what impact has it had on your life? How's your work life changed since then?
Yeah, so basically 20 years on the same project. I had a ton of fun, built up a great management team along with my partner. We had a roadmap for our products that was going to take the government about 10 years to adopt and finally approve those products. The appraisal world is changing rapidly, and we're at the forefront of that, working with the regulators, making sure that we can come up with products that were more efficient, more accurate, and faster, so people didn't have to wait 60 days for an appraiser. A lot of tools to help the appraisers out, data tools, but get them confident in it. So we really had a good roadmap for the next 10 years, and we had a great team to execute on that roadmap. And my kids were in high school, and my son was in high school, daughter was entering high school. And I said, I've been working really hard for the last 20 years on this one project. I think the company's set up great for the next 10 years. I want to be with my kids and see them off. I had no idea there was a pandemic coming 5 months later, but it worked out great that we really got to spend a lot of really fun time together before our kids went off to college.
So you were working very hard for 20 years. Almost 20 years. What did the hours look like? Before, or in the beginning stages, and then it's in the midst of it, and then closer to the end?
Yeah. It was a lot of hours. And I loved what I did. And so my wife was really great that our dinner time with the family wasn't until like 8:30 at night, because I wouldn't be home until then. She would keep the kids awake, I don't know if that's going to impact the kids later in life, we'll see. But yeah, a lot of hours, and my friend over in Trek, he always jokes with me that on Friday afternoons he'd email me or text me like, "Hey, thank goodness it's Friday, TGIF." I'm like, "No, I hate Fridays because I have so much more I want to do. I got more to do." But I mean, 10, 12-hour days were the norm. But there were times where, I literally slept underneath my desk. I slept on the lobby couch many times. I was in data centers before we had cloud providers, and I was president of the company, and I was racking and stacking servers. I configured our first servers and networking, so we did it all. And I also prided myself. There was no coffee. I was going to make the coffee. I was going to make my assistant do it. So lots of hours, but it was fun hours. Just doing just great things for the U.S. real estate mortgage market. Working really hard behind the scenes to make a more stable a lending market. Lots of hours, but it was a ton of fun. And we really tried to be disciplined I worked hard, but I had very specific time for my wife and kids. I didn't make them take the leftovers, so we traveled a lot. Hard hours, but a very purposeful approach to raising a family at the same time.
Sure. And then now what does it look like? Are you working, I'm sure you're working quite a bit less?
Yeah, quite a bit less, good time with the kids, we're traveling a lot, play with cars a lot, but also I'm on the board of quite a few nonprofits, and nonprofits are great. I know you had Amy a few episodes ago, on the board of Tahoe Fund as well. What I love with nonprofits is that the founders are so missional. And Amy's, probably the smartest nonprofit, CEO I've ever met. But you have a lot of very missional, motivated nonprofit entrepreneurs, and I'm able to come in and bring some, business acumen and rigor and help them with their books and their donations and making sure everything's high and tight. So that's been kind of fun. Get enough screen time to stay occupied and keep the brain active, but a lot of time. Wake surfing, mountain biking, traveling, and playing with silly cars.
So I do want to transition into that. I have a couple questions I want to ask you. The first one being, you are a car collector. What is your favorite car in your collection right now at this moment? What are you having the most fun with right now?
Man, favorite's hard, but since you said most fun. So most fun is the car I drove here today. It's a 1988 930 Turbo Porsche, but it's a Safari conversion by a guy named Lee Keen, who's built about 30 of these. And it's basically lifted BFG all-terrain tires, skid plates, rally suspension, custom tuned for these cars by MCS down in Atlanta. And, bucket seats, fun paint jobs, wild interiors. There's 30 of us that have these cars. We meet up all over the country, and we did ice racing in Aspen, all over the Southwest. We, the guys do North Carolina and do their Appalachian adventure out there. And so we're just a bunch of car enthusiasts. These cars are not fussy. They're dented, they're scratched. We just want to have fun in them. So we all kind of revert to the 16-year-old version of Kevin in one of those cars. So I would say that one is probably the most fun.
Yeah. And are all those 30 done by the same guy?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and he's very specific on how they're built. What's allowed, what's not allowed. They're all very analog, old school cars. So nobody's putting in 600 horsepower motors. We're all keeping it very pure and kind of old school, back to the early '80s ethic where Porsche was winning the Paris-Dakar race in their 959s.
Yes. Gotcha. So the last, we'll wrap up the car section. I did ask you to prepare a short list.
Hardest question.
This is the hardest question. What is your dream 5-car garage? And the rules are you have unlimited money and you can't sell any.
Yeah, it's so hard because I'm such a utilitarian collector. I have a lot of friends that collect stuff for financial and it's more museum purposes. I drive everything. And it erodes the value on some, but it's worth it. Cars are meant to be driven and they last longer when they're driven. Man, I would definitely keep my 930 Turbo Safari, the Lancia Delta Integrale, 92. It's an Italian rally car. Mine lived in Japan, so I'm sharing actually cars I own, you know. And so, but I've kind of built my 5 cars. You know, for the deep snow around here, and playing in the backcountry of a 1993 Defender 110 North American spec. You know, 500 of those imported in the country, very rare, but tough as nails car. So those are 3 that I own that I would really love and keep forever. Man, the other 2, it's so hard because I would rotate in so many other cars. The 918 Spider is such a classic car, but it's an early hybrid, crazy fast, crazy complex, amazingly fun to drive, but it's going to have a lot of deferred maintenance. So I think on that list, part of owning a car for a long time is that you got to be prepared to maintain that thing. I love 80s and 90s cars, but man, they will rip your heart out. You know, you pull off a door panel to fix a window regulator, and also all this plastic stuff falls apart. You're like, oh no. So to answer your question, follow up, I would keep my 2004 Ferrari Challenge Stradale, track legal or street legal race car or track car. It's got a half cage in it. It's got harnesses.
360, right?
Yeah. It was like their track version of the 360. Yeah. Mine's, you know, Argento Nürburgring silver with a tricolore stripe. That was the first car. My son Beck and I, he flew down with me in a Ferrari shirt when he was 2 years old. We drove it home to Truckee. So I have to keep that one forever. That 5th slot is going to be really, really hard, but probably my wife's 23 window bus. VW bus, a 1962 23 window deluxe bus. It's got like 60 horsepower, barely goes up Brockway or Mount Rose. It's scary. Drove her up Spooner the other day, scared out of my mind. But it's classy. It started the whole, not only the whole you know, surf culture vibe, but the Westphalia version started the whole overlanding scene, you know, that you can now see today. The sprinters kind of grew out of that. But it's just such a classic, fun, so slow car. That would be round up my 5th.
Yeah, that's a great list. You know, a little bit of everything. So we'll wrap it up now. You know, I'm sure we could talk about cars for, you know, forever, but we don't want to bore the viewers who aren't as interested as we are. So, you know, I'll finish up by asking you the same question, the last question that I ask everybody on the podcast. If you could go back in time and give your 20-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
20-year-old self, one piece of advice and why. I would go back and tell myself that what corporate America does is a bunch of people all figuring out the most efficient way to grab money from each other. That's kind of the game, you know. There's that old adage, there's a fixed amount of money in the world, and everybody's just fighting to get their hands on it, but it just keeps moving around. But when you look at the game everybody's playing, where work becomes monotonous is when you just slide into that game. I would tell 20-year-old Kevin to say, enter that game looking for the counter-cyclical, the counter-cultural opportunities. If everybody's doing one thing, be totally content doing something different. It's scary because you want to go with the herd. You want to go what everybody's doing. But when everybody's doing it, they're just grabbing the same pot of money, you know? But when you're doing something different, you're taking that flyer and taking it from a different angle, whether it's culturally, from a business angle or strategy. One, it's a ton of fun. The adrenaline's way better. But 2, the upside could be way better because nobody's thinking like you are. Their blind spots are your opportunities. Don't try to go with the flow. Get your MBA, learn that stuff, and then figure out, how do I beat all those people that were in class with me? Not by playing the same game, but by playing a different game. But a 20-year-old, that's scary because I had no money. You know, it's easy to say that now because I made a few bucks. Sure. But really encouraging people to go out there. And if it doesn't work and you turn 30 and it didn't work, go get a different job. It's fine. 30's young. You got a lot of earning potential after that. But take a flyer when you're 20.
Yeah.
Be counter-cyclical.
Take risks when you're young.
Yep, absolutely.
Got you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really
Thanks for
appreciate you
having me.
coming on the
Yeah.
podcast. If you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like and subscribe. If you're watching on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to follow for all the upcoming episodes. And I will see you in the next one.